I'm scared by the recent chaos. A lot of change has happened in a short space of time, with work and in other areas, and I'm finding it hard. It's okay to find it hard, and it's really important to appreciate that. Because what can happen sometimes is we find it hard, and it probably is hard, but then we find it hard that we find it hard. We don't like that there's difficulty there. And this is a sense of, in a way, a kind of a positivity working against us. We have a sense of being committed to being well. So because we're not well, we think something's wrong, and therefore sometimes we battle the feelings that are there. But the truth of the matter is, when you're having hard experiences, feeling that it's hard is completely reasonable. It's what is technically called veridical perception. Now, you don't have to call it veridical perception, but basically that means is it matches up. Hard experience, perceived as hard, that adds up. If you're having a hard experience and you perceive it as being great, maybe that's a little bit off. If you're having a great experience and you're perceiving it as hard, maybe that's a challenge too. Hard, perfect. That's what we want. That means you're tuned into what's happening, and that's reasonable. Now, of course, there will still be individual difference as to how hard we find something. And that's based on context, it's based on our individual circumstance, it's based on our history of experience with that kind of thing, and many other factors. So there's definitely individual difference here. But if something's hard, recognizing it as hard is entirely valid and reasonable. So I think when you're faced with a bit of chaos, it's very important that you allow yourself some of that space to say that, yeah, this has been hard, this has been chaotic, and you give yourself a little bit of breathing space to be able to work with that. Now, that being said, chaos is part of the system. So, although it's okay to find it hard, because finding it hard is also part of how the system works, it is important sometimes to look at our belief systems and to assess our expectations. Because sometimes we define things in such a way that there's no room for chaos in the system. And you can just think of this from any day-to-day example. If you make a plan, but there's no contingency, you got to leave this point, get to that point, get to the other place, do the other thing, and you've got it very, very tightly scheduled. You've got a spreadsheet where you've got it to the minute, and there's no contingency built in. Good luck with that. It just doesn't work that way. Because, of course, we don't know all the variables. There can be other things that happen, and people can be late, and buses mightn't show up, and somebody might get a flat tire, and then there can be something you didn't expect whatsoever. Now, that's just a given day. In a given year, there can be pandemics, there can be all kinds of events that you wouldn't have expected that throw a curveball in your direction. So you can't plan all of that. But at the same time, you can allow a little bit of contingency, so hopefully you're not too shocked by it. Now, of course, even with that, there's going to be some things that are very out of the ordinary, like pandemics, not that often, maybe every 100 years or so. So you're not necessarily going to predict that. However, if you have in a day-to-day sense some contingency, if you practice a little bit of chaos and building that into your plans, well, what will happen is that will, in a way, build up your muscle tone. So while you mightn't be completely prepared for what's to come, and that's not the point. The point isn't to be prepared for everything that's to come. The point is to be prepared for not being prepared for what's to come, so that it doesn't hit you then so hard. There's a little bit of room, and you're practicing a certain amount of flexibility. So just like developing muscle tone, you can practice flexibility in a day-to-day sense. You can, as you approach each day, you can try changing things at the last minute, just by your own choice. You can try going a different way. You can try doing something a little bit different, just practicing a certain amount of flexibility. And this is like muscles, because you get flexibility in muscles by stretching them in different directions, by playing with that a little bit, rather than just having one rote and rigid way that you always do things. And that flexibility is useful then, because if you need to reach in different directions for different reasons, you're more capable of doing that. The other thing that chaos can give is, in a positive way, sometimes it breaks our systems in a way that can actually help us to build them in a more effective way. Because typically we're not that motivated to improve things if they're going reasonably well. You don't want to upgrade your computer when it's working good enough. You think, I'll just stick with the old version. But of course, there can be often many benefits to doing so. So sometimes the world comes along and throws a spanner in the works, and it forces us to rethink what we're doing and how we're doing it. Again, this is not to undermine some of the very severe challenges we might face, but even with those, there still is incredible growth and learning that happens from them. To use a very strong example, thinking back to medieval times and, what human rights would and wouldn't have been in medieval times compared to maybe what they are today, we still have a lot of work to do, but there's some stark differences there. And in a sense, it's because it was as bad as it was then, and we recognize that, that's what prompts change now. So sometimes when things get particularly bad, that really forces people to recognize that change and reform is needed. And sometimes one of the worst things that can happen is a kind of a lower level number of problems or injustices. Sometimes it kind of needs to reach a certain point where people go, oh my gosh, and they really recognize it. So although we don't want that to be higher, hopefully we recognize it. And sometimes, unfortunately, it takes it to be higher for us to recognize it. So we can obviously help that by being a bit more conscientious. So we hopefully start spotting things at a lower level before they escalate. But the hope either way is, however it happens, is that when we recognize these things, we create change as a result. So likewise, over the past while, if you've been facing chaos, if your career has been interrupted, if some of the things you spend your time doing and your plans have been interrupted, let's use this as a chance maybe to reflect on your strategy, where you're going, what your priorities really are, and ensure that over the coming weeks and months that you are making sure that they're fit for purpose, making sure that you're upgrading things based on your learning over the past while. So hopefully you're at least getting something from it. And, we do see this on the other sides of pandemics, recessions, or other major events, that there can be some amazing innovation that happens over those times. There can be system changes that are actually really beneficial over the course of time. If you found this valuable, do like, subscribe, and share. And what's your experience? Do you have any questions or topic suggestions? You can contribute in the comments, on social media using hashtag bodymindself, or on jfl.com.